Greetings, fellow captains. This is Darkfireslide, and welcome to round 2 of my first match in the second Steel Division League tournament, where we're doing a round-robin point-style tournament. Today we've got, well, the second round of this. The first round having been me playing as 352nd Infantry versus 3rd Canadian by Mrwooster. I am now playing allies as 2nd Infantry, with Mrwooster playing as 3rd Fallschirmjaeger. So what I go for here is on the map Odon. I decide that I'm going to go for the city again because I appear to have this city play thing figured out from the last game. I'm feeling confident about that. And again, Mrwooster goes for this opening with the recon plane, and again, I'm not really convinced that it's the best play, but it does have 2 vet stars, so it's very good at spotting things, which obviously can be very very useful. I call in a mortar again in kind of a central position to kind of dominate this central area, and of course in a city in the early game I'm always ready to be cautious. I opt for a minimalist style here on the left, just have the basic necessities of a rifle squad, a recon bazooka team, and a 57mm AT gun, with more or less the same on the right side of the map. And again, once again, I'm forced to respond to this by building some early anti-air. And I think that the anti-air is the right play, because while a plane could shoot it down, anti-air is cheaper, and it's going to be able to deter future planes while you set up your own air forces in response. Now, I get a lucky shot off on this L6 light tank that comes around the corner with my 57mm AT gun. He does, however, have this recoilless rifle, LG40, coming up to more or less wreak havoc on my units, as we'll see in a few minutes here. I think if I were to change something about this recon plane play is I wouldn't have it loiter for so long, just because it's in such a vulnerable position. Like the recon plane itself is so vulnerable when you don't have air supremacy. There's this LG40 going into action here. My 2 rifle squads opening up on this Fallschirmjaeger Führer. And as we can see, we've got a pretty solid layered Fallschirmjaeger defense here. Although this central part of the map, or this west central part of the map, is a little bit open. And I think that both of us didn't really commit anything to this west side. I built an AT gun just because, again, building an AT gun on an open position like this is always a good idea when you can hide it in a forest. If your enemy doesn't anticipate that at least a little bit, you can put yourself in a really good position. But I see this Fallschirmjaeger squad appear. I've got 2 rifle squads to go up against it, and I just start mortaring it because that's what you do. That's how you beat Fallschirmjaeger. You blow them up. Now, about this LG40, I respond in kind with the 2-star veteran 50mm mortar that 2nd Infantry gets. And what I love this right here. So I build this M15 GMC, this Phase A anti-air half-track, which sends the Storch running for the hills. But more importantly, because so many of Mrwooster's forces are Fallschirmjaeger and infantry in general, this AA half-track just wreaks havoc on these Fallschirmjaeger. I mean, it's brutal what this half-track does, and I'm pretty sure that I keep it alive for most of the game, too. A little bit of mortar micro here, managing to predict where these Fallschirmjaeger are going to be, and start approaching again with my rifles now that they're pinned down, going for a counterattack, because that aggressive play by Mrwooster isn't really backed up by anything, with his LG40 especially being pinned. And again, nothing really happening on the west. I noticed that he hasn't really deployed into the town at all. Maybe he was feeling a little nervous because we played these 2 games back to back. So getting into his headspace here, maybe he's feeling a little nervous about the town after last game, and especially after maybe seeing that this mortar is in this position, he's feeling a little nervous about advancing into the city. These Fallschirmjaeger engaging again, almost instantly pinning my riflemen. Pretty good stuff by those units, and with Vet 3, those are some scary infantry right there. One of my favorite infantry units in the game. You know, what don't they have is kind of how I feel about them. Although they are admittedly a medium range unit and not a close range unit, which is how they're kind of being used in this game, and I think that's sort of to Mrwooster's disadvantage here. Because at the ranges where they're using all three of their weapons, you know, that's 14 HE on a 10-man squad with AT, and that's great if you can get them into that perfect range, either using smoke or just by using mortars. They're gonna do some damage. Now he goes for this cheeky Fallschirmjaeger play. Thinks maybe I won't spot these units coming out of the forest, but my half-track does see them when they attempt to come out here and start shooting with their Panzerfaust. Now, I will stress to anyone just learning this game that artillery is so important. Don't play without artillery or support guns of at least some kind. And one thing we actually learned is that from the last game that we played, Mrwooster is also bringing in his own mortars to kind of cause me some issues. I moved this rifle squad here across the open. This Fallschirmjaeger squad pins them. I start moving the other squad because I know that I've got this unit pinned and I really want to get it to surrender maybe. And again, in close quarters, we really need this this command unit to keep these units in the fight and stop them from surrendering and stop them from getting pinned in close quarters. Because in close quarters, cities fighting is really where infantry do the most amount of damage, or in forests as well. This LG-40 is firing again. Feel bad for these riflemen that are just getting chewed up by all these field guns and Fallschirmjaeger, but that's what they're there for. To get butchered. Man, when you say it that way. When you say it that way. So, as we can see, 81mm mortar here. Interesting note about airborne units. When airborne units are in enemy territory, they still regain their morale when they're pinned down or otherwise distressed, which can be useful depending on the circumstances. These Spade troop are going to get pinned down by my mortar, I believe, while these assault rangers are moving up into position. Now he's counter mortaring on my infantry, and pretty soon everyone's pinned. And I've got these assault rangers moving up with their flamethrower, their Thompsons, and those 3 Garands. Good stuff there. I call in a Sherman on this side because I know that all he really has is this machine gun, the Spade troop, and this Pak-41, which has no way of penetrating the front of my tank at an actual distance. He does manage to stun the crew a couple of times, which is good for him, but I managed to shoot back, and that AT gun is going to go down in short order here. And overall, I've managed to take the game in A, which is a really good way to play second infantry. Is just this style of very aggressive phase A play. Lots of good tools for doing that. Good mortars, good infantry, good phase A tanks with the M4DD Shermans, the D-Day Shermans with the little lifeboat around them. I don't know. I always remember hearing about the Normandy landings that those pretty much almost all sunk trying to get to the beach. And the ones that did just got blown up by Flak 88s anyway. But maybe some of them made it ashore, and that's why there's only 1 or 2 in each deck, right? You know, out of the hundreds they probably sent. I'm just joking, of course. Now this Fallschirmjaeger squad does go into the town and try to kill my assault rangers, but Fallschirmjaeger, again, they're not close combat infantry. They do have a decent close combat ability of 6 HE, but that's what a standard rifleman squad will have. But American rifles will have even more at 8. You know, more than British squads, more than about as much as Pioneers, really. So you really don't want to be. That's really not how you want to be using Fallschirmjaeger. Just based on their loadout, they're really good at controlling engagements between 300 to 200 meters with those G43s and their FG42s. And as you can see, I do manage to kill the AT gun. He did not retreat it in time. And so this M4 is just going to sort of start moving through here, crushing everything in its path, and good times were had by all allied players. This LG-40 is still alive, but it's pretty rough at 1 hit point, and I'm about to mortar it to death. I'm pretty sure with the 60mm mortar. Correcting myself from earlier when I said a 50. It's a 60. I must be thinking of the Axis mortar. I think that one of these is gonna land, and there we go. That did it. Good stuff. I do call in this this T-30 HMC, but this ends up being a not very necessary call. This side was already pretty much won. I didn't really need it. Now, as sort of a defensive play here, Mrwooster going in for this double Stug play. I do believe these are 165 points, although that may be my memory from the Pegasus division. They do have the 10 frontal armor, and 14 penetration is pretty solid. Really good at knocking out Shermans, which, as you may or may not have noticed, I have. Especially these D-Day Shermans that only have 10 frontal armor. At maximum range, this Sherman just cannot do anything against the Stug. It has like an 8% chance to penetrate at maximum range, if it actually manages to hit, which isn't really great considering how the accuracy system works. 5 accuracy at maximum range is just not very good. Now, because these fights are getting a little bit more close quarters, I do call in a command unit to cover these units that are in close quarters so that they don't surrender immediately when they get pinned down in close quarters. Call in a recon unit. I spot this L6. I got a couple of bazookas moving in, as well as getting a supply on my mortar as well. Now, I notice that he's got this Stug and this L6 over here, and I'm really worried about this. So I try to use the Sherman the way you would want to use them, which is ambushes at close range, where you can make use of the fact that AP shells get better the closer you are to the target. So these Marauders go after the Stug, and I decided at this point that it's a good time to go after the Stug, but it ends up not necessarily working out the way that I wanted it to. Mostly because his Stug actually retreats to a useful position. I know, strange concept, a unit actually retreating and going to a safe place. But I mean, my attention is so spread on this map. There's just so much to do. There's the Stug over here to worry about, this L6, this mortar, this Stug, and this L6 over here. A couple of Sturm Pioneers now. Another mortar. And all I've got over here left really is this Sherman. These Fallschirmjaeger, of course, pinning down these riflemen here in the city. I am trying to mortar them in return, but my mortar just kind of shooting at nothing in the meantime. Yeah, and there goes the Sherman to the Stug. I did not manage to get it into a good enough position. Now I do have this 76mm AT gun as kind of a last resort, and I started shooting at this Stug. But a one-on-one fight with an AT gun and a tank doesn't always go the way that you want it to. As you can see, I do get kind of an unlucky bounce. 4 AP over what a tank has is a pretty decent chance to penetrate. But as we're going to see here, this Vet 2 ME109 is really going to give this AT gun hell. So in response, this entire flank has collapsed, so I just bring in pretty much all the cheap infantry I can, as well as another Sherman to kind of cover this up and clot up, so to speak, if the breach in my line is a wound by comparison. This Sherman managed to kill the L6 over here, and I'm just being super cautious because of the Stug. Stugs are actually quite good. If when used correctly. They're kind of a difficult unit to micro just because of the lack of a turret, but they do turn pretty quickly, which is nice for a unit of that type, of course. But yeah, this ME109 is just completely wrecking this 76mm, and there's nothing I can really do about it. It's just kind of pinned in place. Now I do call in the fighter ace that 2nd Infantry gets, and he decides to retreat his ME109. I don't think that my P47 manages to turn around in time to get the kill, so I just kind of have him start loitering and go for some airstrikes. But I do get this scout aircraft first, I believe. It actually gets killed by my Sherman. My Sherman's 50 cal manages to kill the aircraft as he gets killed by this Stug, and then that's pretty funny actually. I just realized that. I thought that my fighter got it for sure. So I get an assault, 3 rifle squads as well as a Sherman, and realize that my Sherman is kind of marching into a death trap here, but I'm trying to cover this 76mm AT gun's retreat. I do retreat it again, but I think to myself, like, this Sherman just needs to get out of dodge. 2 bounces, as we can see, just really not what you're looking for with that Sherman. Managed to kill these Fallschirmjaeger with a mortar, with 3 vet stars thanks to that ranger leader. Pretty nasty stuff having a mortar that accurate. And this is kind of a mistake by me. I leave this plane loitering for way too long, not actually doing anything. Obviously just a big mistake of mine. I kind of realized that. Send him in. He manages to do some suppression against these Fallschirmjaeger. And those mortars are going to secure that pin. Maybe do some damage too, from the looks of it. Look how quickly that fires too. Whoo-wee. This is why you always give your mortars vet. Now, this AT gun does make it back to this line, but as we can see, the Stug is just going to finish it off because it spots it. Now, because he wasn't very good with his recon, he accidentally left his recon all the way up here. He doesn't spot any of these infantry. He doesn't know that any of this is here except for the Sherman. He just thinks that all I have is a Sherman. Now, he does call in another AT gun. I don't know what AT gun it is. But I use a little bit of a juke here, and this is really something that I love about the Sherman, is that you can do stuff like this. So I peek the corner with my Sherman, get that first shot off thanks to that increased aim time, thanks to the stabilizer, kill that Stug off. I think I get the L6 on the first shot too. I do not, but killing that Stug was just so important. That Focke-Wulf is running for its life. I kill that L6. I get the rest of the map back, basically. And really, this is why 2nd Infantry is just so good, is their ability to simultaneously push and hold the line at the same time as the infantry division is something that's just super valuable. And noticing now probably that I have all these units in this Sherman on this flank pretty much uncontested, Mrwooster does go ahead and surrender, thus securing my 2nd victory of the tournament. And I'm feeling pretty good about that one. That was a lot more convincing than the first round as 3-5-2. And a lot of my units, not too many kills, pretty spread evenly. So everyone kind of did their part this game. I did kill 2-1, which is good. Having that advantage in terms of units is always nice. And 500 points of units is nothing to sneeze at. Although I did lose my fair share of good units as well. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm going to be posting the rest of my matches for the rest of the tournament. So they'll be up here, you know, whether or not you like the content or not. But I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you on the next one.